When we think of weakness, our minds are often conditioned to see it as something shameful, something that exposes our flaws, something that should be hidden from the world at all costs. But in reality, weakness is not the absence of strength, it is the doorway through which a greater, deeper, and more authentic strength flows into our lives, a strength that does not come from human effort alone, but from a divine source that surpasses the limits of what we can do by ourselves. And when we truly understand this, we no longer fear our limitations, we no longer despise the parts of ourselves that feel broken or inadequate. Instead, we learn to embrace them, because in those very cracks the light of divine power shines the brightest. And this is the message that transforms not just the way we see ourselves, but the way we live our lives each day. Because weakness is not a barrier. It is an invitation to allow something greater to work through us, something that cannot be measured by human standards of success or strength. Think about how often we are taught from childhood to cover up our insecurities, to pretend we are strong even when we are hurting, to act as if we have it all together, when deep inside we are breaking apart. Yet the truth is that pretending to be invincible creates a wall between us and the true flow of divine strength, because divine power does not rush into the proud or the self-sufficient. It fills the ones who admit they cannot do it alone. It fills the ones who are honest about their weakness, and it is in that honesty that transformation begins. For the moment you admit your weakness, you create space for the universe, for God, for the divine intelligence that governs life to step in and show you that you are not alone and that you never were. When you look back at your life, you will see that some of the most profound breakthroughs did not come when everything was smooth and easy. They came when you had no choice but to lean on a strength beyond your own. They came when you were at the end of your rope and suddenly discovered a power within you that you never realized was there. And in that moment, weakness became the very tool that introduced you to your true capacity, not a capacity defined by muscle, intellect, or social standing, but a capacity infused with divine energy. And once you see this truth, weakness stops being a curse. It becomes a gift because it keeps you humble, it keeps you open, it keeps you connected to the source that never runs dry. We live in a culture obsessed with perfection, where people try to mask every flaw with filters, achievements, or external validation. But deep down, everyone has cracks. Everyone has moments of self-doubt. Everyone has struggles they wish they could erase. And when you understand that it is through those cracks that divine strength enters, you no longer need to live under the exhausting weight of pretending. You no longer need to prove that you are enough by yourself, because you recognize that you were never meant to carry the burden of life alone. You were meant to be a vessel, a channel, a living proof that when human weakness meets divine power, miracles unfold, resilience is born, and courage rises in ways that logic alone cannot explain. Consider the stories of people who faced unimaginable adversity, yet emerged stronger than anyone expected. Their lives testify to the truth that weakness is not the end. It is the beginning of something sacred, because in their weakest hours they discovered faith, they discovered trust, they discovered an inner fire that had been dormant until life forced it to awaken. And when they tell their stories, we are not inspired because they were flawless. We are inspired because they were broken and still stood, because they admitted their struggles and still found a way to keep moving, because they show us that weakness is not the opposite of strength. It is the soil in which true strength grows. If we are honest, we resist weakness because it threatens our pride. It makes us feel small. It makes us vulnerable in front of others. But what if vulnerability is not something to be feared but embraced? What if the very moments you feel like collapsing are the moments when you are closest to your authentic self, the self that does not rely on masks or facades, the self that is real, raw, and open enough to be filled with divine presence? Because strength without humility is arrogance, but weakness embraced becomes humility, and humility is the bridge to divine connection. And once you walk that bridge, you discover a strength that is unshakable. Not because it is yours alone, but because it is shared with the infinite. Weakness also teaches compassion. For when you embrace your own struggles, you stop judging others so harshly. You realize that everyone is fighting battles you cannot see. And instead of mocking or belittling others for their flaws, you extend grace, patience, and understanding. And that is another form of divine strength, because the strongest people are not those who can lift the heaviest weights or dominate others. The strongest people are those who can love when it is hardest, forgive when it feels impossible, and show kindness when the world tells them to be bitter. And all of that flows out of the awareness of weakness. Because when you know how it feels to be broken, you become an instrument of healing for others who are hurting. When you embrace weakness, you also release the toxic illusion of control. Because so much of our anxiety comes from the belief that we must manage every outcome, control every detail, and fix everything on our own. But weakness reminds us that we are human, that we are limited, and that there is a higher power that sees the full picture when we cannot. And by letting go, by surrendering the illusion of control, we open ourselves to guidance, to intuition, to miracles that unfold when we stop clinging and start trusting. And in that surrender lies the deepest form of strength, because it is the kind of strength that does not waver when plans change or when storms arrive. It is rooted in something eternal, something unshakable, something divine. Imagine standing in front of a mountain you cannot climb with your own strength. Every attempt leaves you exhausted. Every step feels impossible. And just when you admit you cannot make it, you discover a hand reaching out to pull you up. That hand is the symbol of divine power. It is the reminder that you were never meant to climb alone. And when you embrace the truth of your weakness, you are not giving up. You are opening up to help, to grace, to power that multiplies your effort and carries you where you could never go by yourself. And that is why weakness should not be feared but welcomed. Because it is the very condition that allows divine intervention to manifest even in nature. We see this truth reflected. Seeds must break before they grow. Soil must be cracked before life emerges. Rivers carve through rocks, not because of brute force, but because of persistence that flows from surrender. The same is true in our lives. The cracks, the breaking, the weaknesses, they are not signs of failure. They are signs of transformation. And when we embrace them, we align ourselves with the deeper rhythm of life, the rhythm where divine strength is always present, always available, always made perfect in the places we feel weakest. So when you think of weakness, do not shrink back in shame. Do not hide it as if it disqualifies you. Instead, embrace it as the sacred key that unlocks the door to divine strength. Embrace it as the reminder that you are not supposed to be perfect. You are supposed to be real. And in your realness, the divine power within you rises. It shines. It carries you further than your own ability ever could. And it is in that embrace that you discover the truth that weakness is not the end of your strength, but the beginning of divine strength flowing through you in ways you never imagined possible. The ego is one of the greatest barriers between us and the divine flow of power that longs to express itself through our lives. It whispers that we must do everything on our own, that we must prove our worth, that we must stand taller than others in order to be valuable. But the truth is the ego's voice is built on fear, on comparison, on separation. And as long as we allow that voice to control us, we remain cut off from the infinite well of strength and wisdom that exists beyond our limited understanding. Letting go of ego is not about diminishing yourself. It is about realizing that you are more than your achievements, more than your failures, more than your possessions or titles. It is about seeing yourself as a vessel through which divine energy flows, and recognizing that the greatest power comes not from clinging to the illusion of control, but from surrendering to something greater that wants to work in and through you. The ego thrives on the idea of I, me, mine. It builds walls around the heart and convinces us that separation from others is the only way to feel secure. It tells us that our value is determined by how we compare to those around us. But this way of living traps us in cycles of competition, anxiety, and dissatisfaction, because there will always be someone stronger, smarter, richer, or more accomplished. The ego keeps us running endlessly on a treadmill of proving ourselves yet never feeling enough. And in this endless chase, we drain our energy, we exhaust our spirit, and we distance ourselves from the higher power that has already declared our worth. The divine does not measure us by the ego's standards. The divine sees us as whole even in our imperfections, complete even in our incompleteness, valuable not because of what we do, but because of what we are. Sparks of infinite light in human form. Letting go of ego requires courage, because the ego is deeply woven into how we think about ourselves. We fear that if we let go of it, we will lose our identity, but in reality, the opposite is true. When we release the grip of ego, we do not lose ourselves. We discover our true selves, the self that is not built on fear or comparison, but on connection, love, and divine strength. And when this self emerges, we begin to live differently. We stop striving to dominate and start striving to serve. We stop grasping for recognition and start offering value. We stop worrying about how others see us and start aligning with how the divine sees us. And this shift opens the door for higher power to work through us in ways we could never orchestrate on our own. The ego is obsessed with control. It wants to dictate every outcome, manipulate every detail, and make sure everything goes according to its plan. But life is too vast, too mysterious, and too unpredictable to be contained within the small box of the ego's demands. When things do not go our way, the ego panics, it blames, it resists, it tightens its grip. Yet ironically, it is in these very moments of resistance that we suffer most, because the ego is fighting a battle it can never win. The universe is larger than the ego. Divine intelligence is wiser than the ego. Life itself is constantly unfolding in ways we cannot predict, and the more we cling, the more we hurt. But the moment we let go, the moment we release the illusion of control, we feel a peace that surpasses understanding, a peace that comes from trust, and in that trust, higher power is free to guide us toward outcomes far better than the ones the ego tried to force. Letting go of ego also transforms the way we relate to others. When ego rules, we view people as threats or as tools. Either they are competitors standing in the way of our goals, or they are instruments we use to reach them. But when ego loosens and higher power flows, we begin to see others as reflections of ourselves. As fellow travelers on this journey of life, we begin to respect, to empathize, to love without conditions, and this creates bonds that the ego could never form. The ego isolates, but divine connection unites, and in that unity there is strength, because the higher power does not work only through isolated individuals. It works through community, through compassion, through the joining of hearts, and when ego steps aside, this flow becomes unstoppable. The ego feeds on recognition. It wants applause, it wants titles, it wants the world to see and approve. But divine strength does not need applause. Divine strength is quiet, steady, and unshakable. It works in the hidden places of the heart. It works when no one is watching. It works not to inflate the self, but to uplift the whole. And when we let go of the ego's hunger for validation, we find a deeper joy, a joy that is not dependent on circumstances, not fragile in the face of criticism, not inflated by praise, but steady in love. And this joy is the true reward of surrendering the ego, because it connects us to the eternal source of peace and purpose that cannot be taken away. Letting go of ego is also about releasing the need to be right. How often do we waste energy defending our opinions, clinging to our version of truth, fighting to prove others wrong just so the ego can feel superior? But in these battles, we lose sight of growth, we lose sight of wisdom, because the ego would rather win an argument than learn a lesson. When we step aside from ego, we open ourselves to humility, and humility is not weakness. Humility is strength under control. Humility is the courage to admit we don't have all the answers, the openness to learn, and the willingness to listen. And in that space, higher power teaches us, molds us, shapes us, and fills us with insights we would never gain if we stayed locked inside the ego's prison. Another way ego blocks higher power is through fear, because ego's survival depends on maintaining an image, on keeping up appearances. It constantly worries about how others perceive us, what they will think if we fail, how they will react if we stumble. But divine strength thrives in authenticity, not in appearance. When we let go of ego, we no longer live for the approval of others. We live for alignment with the divine, and in this alignment, fear dissolves, because fear is tied to losing something. But when you realize that everything you need flows from an infinite source, you are no longer afraid of losing. You are no longer chained by the opinions of others. You are free to live fully, to express boldly, to love without restraint, and that is the power of releasing ego. Letting go of ego is not a one-time act, but a daily practice. Each day life presents us with opportunities to choose between ego and surrender, between pride and humility, between control and trust, and with each choice we make, we either tighten the grip of ego or loosen it. We either close the door on higher power or open it wider. And though the ego may scream, though it may resist, the more we practice surrender, the lighter we feel, the freer we live, the more power flows through us. Because life is not asking us to carry the burden of everything. It is asking us to release, to trust, to be vessels through which divine love and strength can flow. We can see the results of ego everywhere in the world: conflict, greed, division, exploitation. All of it is rooted in the false belief of separation that ego promotes. But imagine what happens when individuals, families, communities begin to let go of ego, when instead of asking, how can I take more for myself, they ask, how can I serve? How can I contribute? How can I allow something greater to flow through me? The world begins to heal, relationships begin to mend, creativity begins to blossom, and people begin to discover strength, not by standing over one another, but by lifting one another up. And this is the evidence of higher power at work. Power that does not dominate but empowers. Power that does not boast but blesses. Power that does not separate but unites. The ego says you must do it alone to prove your strength. But higher power says you are never alone. The ego says you must win to be worthy. But higher power says you are worthy already. The ego says cling tightly, control everything, trust no one. But higher power whispers let go, trust, open, and watch how much more can be accomplished when you stop blocking the flow. And when we finally experience this shift within ourselves, when we taste the freedom of life beyond ego, we realize that the ego was never our protector. It was our prison. And surrender is not defeat, it is liberation. It is the pathway through which the fullness of divine power moves into our lives and expresses itself in ways far greater than anything the ego could ever achieve on its own. Life presents itself not as a straight path of ease, but as a series of challenges, struggles, and unexpected obstacles that test the depth of who we are. And though at times these difficulties feel overwhelming, they carry within them the seeds of transformation, growth, and purpose. It is easy to see challenges as punishments or misfortunes. But when we shift our perspective, we begin to understand that struggles are not random. They are not meaningless. They are shaping forces, sculpting us into who we are meant to become. Every challenge we face has the potential to reveal hidden strength, to refine our character, to awaken dormant abilities, and to redirect our lives toward a purpose greater than comfort. The pain we endure is not without reason. It is the training ground that prepares us for the calling we are meant to fulfill. Think of the times in your life when you faced hardship. Perhaps it was the loss of someone you love, the failure of a dream you held dear, a betrayal that cut deeply, or a season of loneliness that seemed unbearable. In the midst of those struggles, you may have felt broken. You may have questioned why it was happening. You may have even wondered if you had the strength to continue. But as time passed, you likely discovered that those very moments forged resilience within you. They stripped away illusions. They forced you to dig deeper than you thought possible. And they awakened wisdom you never would have gained if life had always been smooth. Struggle is a teacher that does not speak gently but speaks powerfully. It reveals truths we cannot learn from ease and comfort. It introduces us to aspects of ourselves that only rise when everything else is falling apart. Purpose is not found in avoiding challenges, but in engaging with them. Because purpose is not about living without struggle. It is about finding meaning in the midst of it. When we embrace challenges as part of our journey, we stop asking, why me, and start asking, what is this trying to teach me? What strength is this revealing? What path is this opening? And in that shift of perspective, everything changes. Struggles no longer appear as enemies, but as allies in disguise. They no longer feel like barriers, but like doorways. And as we step through them, we step closer to the purpose we were created for. Each challenge has a lesson written inside it. And the purpose of life is often discovered not in the moments of ease, but in the willingness to extract those lessons and let them shape the direction of our future. Every person who has achieved greatness, who has lived with impact, who has inspired others, has walked through seasons of immense struggle. Their challenges did not disqualify them from purpose, they revealed it. Adversity became the soil in which their mission grew. And when we study their stories, we realize that the very thing that once felt like their greatest setback became the very thing that fueled their greatest contribution. Pain can be turned into passion. Brokenness can be turned into compassion. Failure can be turned into innovation. And weakness can be turned into strength. But only if we are willing to see beyond the surface of the struggle and look into the deeper meaning hidden within it. Struggles refine us in ways that comfort never can. Comfort makes us complacent. It lulls us into believing that life is only about ease and pleasure. But struggle shakes us awake. It forces us to question what matters. It strips away the superficial and points us toward what is real. When everything falls apart, we discover what truly holds value. We discover the relationships that matter, the faith that sustains, the strength that rises from within. And this clarity is part of our purpose. Because our purpose is not found in building lives of surface-level success, but in aligning with deeper truths that give our existence meaning. And struggle is often the vehicle that drives us toward that alignment. Challenges also cultivate empathy. When we go through pain ourselves, we become more capable of understanding the pain of others. Our struggles expand our hearts. They allow us to connect with others on a level that ease cannot. And this connection is essential to living with purpose. Because true purpose is rarely about serving ourselves alone. It is about serving others, about making a difference, about using our experiences not only to grow personally, but to contribute collectively. When you walk through darkness and survived, you carry within you a light that can guide someone else who is still lost. When you have endured heartbreak and healed, you carry a message of hope for those who feel hopeless. And when you have struggled and found strength, you embody the truth that others can too. Your struggles become a bridge of connection, and that bridge is one of the most profound expressions of purpose. Struggles also break the illusion of self-sufficiency. They remind us that we cannot always rely on our own strength. They point us toward the higher power that sustains us when we are weak, and in that dependence we discover a purpose that is not just about achieving our goals, but about aligning with something bigger than ourselves. Life is not about climbing ladders of personal success alone. It is about realizing that we are part of a grander design, a flow of divine energy that works through us when we open ourselves to it, and often it is in struggle that we finally let go of our illusion of control and allow that higher power to guide us. And in that surrender, our true purpose unfolds. There is also a hidden beauty in challenges because they remind us that growth is a process. A seed cannot become a tree overnight. It must endure seasons, storms, and stretches of darkness underground before it can break through and rise toward the light. In the same way, our struggles are part of our becoming. They may feel like delays or detours, but they are not. They are the very process by which we are being prepared. Just as fire refines gold, challenges refine us, stripping away what is unnecessary, sharpening what is essential, and strengthening us to carry the weight of the purpose we are destined for. Without this process, we would not be ready. Without the struggle, we would not have the foundation to sustain the calling. When we find purpose in challenges, we stop resenting them and start respecting them. We begin to see that the path of least resistance is rarely the path of deepest fulfillment. We realize that the seasons we wanted to escape were the very seasons that gave us depth. And we begin to live not in fear of struggle, but in faith that every struggle carries within it a treasure. Every challenge contains a hidden gift, and our purpose is to discover that gift and use it. Because life is not happening to us, it is happening for us. And struggle is one of the most powerful ways it delivers its lessons. Sometimes purpose is revealed only in hindsight. We look back at challenges we thought would destroy us and realize they built us. We look back at failures we thought were the end and realize they were the beginning. We look back at losses we thought we could never survive and realize they shaped us into someone capable of more love, more strength, and more wisdom. Hindsight allows us to see the threads connecting our struggles to our growth, but faith allows us to believe in that connection even when we cannot see it yet. Faith allows us to hold on in the middle of the struggle, knowing that purpose is being written even in the pain. And this faith itself becomes part of our strength because it sustains us through the storm until the lessons emerge. Finding purpose in challenges requires us to stop running from discomfort and start engaging with it. It requires us to ask better questions, not why is this happening to me, but what can I learn from this? Who am I becoming through this? How is this shaping the way I can serve others? When we ask these questions, our struggles become teachers rather than tormentors. They become allies rather than enemies. And the very energy that once weighed us down becomes the fuel that propels us forward. This is the alchemy of purpose, the transformation of struggle into strength, of pain into power, of difficulty into destiny. And it is available to every person willing to look deeper than the surface. The journey of life will always include challenges. No one is exempt, but those who thrive are the ones who choose to see purpose in their struggles. They do not let hardships define them as victims. They allow hardships to refine them as victors. They do not shrink under the weight of obstacles. They rise through them, and in rising they inspire others to do the same. Because purpose is not only about personal fulfillment, it is about collective upliftment. When you overcome your struggles with courage and faith, you give others permission to believe they can too. Your story becomes a source of hope, your journey becomes a roadmap, and your life becomes a testimony that challenges are not the end, but the beginning of a deeper and more meaningful path.